Hello everybody. Today I'm kind of going to do a little bit of a open and free for all, just talking stream, but I've got a couple of things that I do want to hit upon. Number one, um, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of things that are going to be happening on my channel, or on our channel, I should say, because of course it's not just me, but I've got plenty of other people who are contributing to this channel, and without them, we would have hardly any content. Um, so first of all, there is going to be a couple of things for patrons only. And yes, for those of you who have been wondering, and I realize that my patrons page isn't really up to date, because when I read the tier information the other day, I realized that I just say, if you're a patron, then you will get early access to episodes, which is true. And which was true when we first set up the Patreon to fund things like our Roll20 and the adventures that we're playing, but most importantly, our Zoom license, which isn't exactly cheap. Um, but since then, we have made a huge change, and that is that we have been playing patrons only content, which we call crazy games. The background to this was that I really wanted to DM D&D, which I had played before in various editions but never DM'd, and I just wanted to try this out with the usual suspects. And so I said, let's just, do this for ourselves. But we really like recording our sessions simply because when we play a larger campaign, we just want to be able to listen back, maybe take notes, or even for me as the DM, to listen back to older episodes to know where we're at, to sometimes even make sure that I remember things, because when you're DMing, you find it sometimes, or I find it sometimes difficult to write down every single thing that my players are saying or doing, and it may come in handy in later episodes to be able to refer back to something. And so we recorded this and we made it available for our patrons only because we just posted it on our patron page. And we have played 3 or 4 sessions of Monster of the Week, um, Spuk auf dem Campus. Then we added a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, which we called Rocking the Sword Coast, which lasted for about 11 episodes. And then something happened to our players and characters, and we're not going to tell you what this is, but now they're somewhere different. And now we're going to continue this campaign with a season called Dragons on the Wind of Morning. And we also played another Monster of the Week campaign, 5 episodes of Welcome to Pleasant Hill, which we've also concluded. So this is what patrons get if they subscribe, just so that it's absolutely clear. You do get a little more than just the episodes 2 weeks in advance. So then I would like to make a shout out to a channel that I only discovered yesterday, and that's the Shelm Show, and I'm going to link it in the descriptions to this video. It's an awesome channel which I really like. So I've binge watched or basically binge listened to some of the things and some of the episodes. Um, the gentleman who is running this channel is actually a very avid DSA player, has been playing for decades. Then there was a hiatus. It kind of reminded me a little bit of myself when I then had a hiatus because, the people I was playing with were no longer available, and then I got back into it. And he also, I mean, he focuses on DSA, but he has a lot of things that he shows you how to draw maps, etc. And it's just an all-round enjoyable channel. He also streams live on Mondays. I want to say at 2100 hours CET, CEST, but you can check it out on his channel. And now for the, let's say, serious part, sandboxing versus railroading. Why am I talking about this today? Because this is a topic that people frequently discuss, and it has basically presented itself to me as a problem statement in recent weeks because of a couple of things that I have lived through as a player, but also as a DM. Because, as you may know, there is this big controversy almost between, oh, only sandbox systems or sandbox worlds are great because everyone needs to have full player empowerment and the players just need to be able to do whatever. And if you basically have a pre-written adventure or even a imagined series of events in the DM's head, you will advertently or inadvertently, directly or indirectly, guide your players through it. So any choices that they seem to have are only make-believe choices, and it's not really true. So people don't really have choices, but you're trying to disguise it better or worse. Um, and that is an interesting controversy, which I also watched a really interesting video about, which was hosted by Mayri Stritter, and I can only recommend it. And you had the likes of Hartmar von Wieser, Hartmar von, now I've forgotten his last name, but also Tim Wiese, and I want to say was Lena Falkenhagen there, possibly. And it was really about the difference between do you actually have a prescripted story that you're telling, which would mean that you need to somehow tease your players to do the right things in order for the adventure to work? Or do you actually just say, oh, well, the players are in a completely, the characters and players are in a completely open world and they can do whatever. And then depending on what that whatever is, you as the DM need to somehow turn this into a story. And this is something that I have experienced as a player only recently, because currently we're playing Curse of Strahd, and you can watch that on the channel, and that is a huge sandbox. And of course, Curse of Strahd, 5th edition, does have a story, so Strahd von Zarovich is there. I don't know how the story ends. I've never played it. I don't know. We're in the middle of it. But as the actual setting goes, you can pretty much go anywhere. You can pretty much do anything you like. I mean, it's a very gray area, so basically people aren't really good or bad. It's not black and white. So, depending on what your character is and what you are like as a character, you can end up just basically deciding, oh, it's a good idea to kill people because they're all soulless or whatever. And this will have consequences. So in theory, it's a sandbox, and in theory, you can do whatever you like. But of course, if everybody just went their separate ways, and that's what our party isn't doing, and just went on to do whatever they liked, first of all, they would probably die really quickly, but it would also be a nightmare for the DM because she would have to basically cover every single person's individual stroll through Barovia, as it were. But so you could say if you're a true sandboxer, then you could say, oh wow, this is great. You know, like infinite possibilities. Yes, in theory, yes, but I have to say that me as a player, I find that actually quite stressful because um, I like to kind of understand how the world works, and I also like to kind of make a decision, where do I need to go? What are the things we need to do? I like planning. And so basically, we had this plan of what we were going to do. We were going to kill a vampire spawn in the next village over. Then we heard that there is a vineyard that usually delivers wine to the restaurant or to the inn we were staying at, but that they hadn't received any deliveries. So basically then one of the characters was like, well, we should investigate this. And I also felt, my character felt, yeah, that's weird, but I mean, you know, maybe deal with the vampire spawn first and then go there. So there was this discussion, what should we do first? Then we've also got another NPC that has made it absolutely clear that she would like to talk to us. Then, of course, there is Strahd. Do we want to talk to him? Which I think is going to be a bad idea, but you never know. And then we had basically closed one quest. And then this guy comes up to my character and asks her to do something entirely different, which is somehow really urgent. Someone's bones have been stolen, so that's some kind of saint, and if we don't return them, weird things and terrible things are going to happen. So I was really conflicted because I was like, yeah, but I mean, we're supposed to do this. And the fact that there are so many strands, and that is not necessarily the hallmark of a sandbox, but the hallmark of a very open scenario, means that prioritizing is getting difficult because then other things come in, then somebody else might show up, or you might see something. And it really meant that I was kind of sitting there going, I have no idea how to how to progress now. It was really analysis paralysis, which I don't have when I play board games, and I'd never experienced in a role-playing situation. But there I was sitting going, honestly, this is super stressful. I have no idea what to do now or where to go. I find it, I mean, I have priorities, and now everybody else is coming to our party and reprioritizing things and saying, well, this is more important and that is more important, blah, blah, blah. And that was the first time that I actually understood, because that was the first time I experienced a sandbox-like experience, how stressful this can be for players. And I mean, that's not a negative. I'm not saying that I don't want to play, blah, 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 but it is something where you really are put to the test. And I think it depends on your personality how well you deal with this. And I'm somebody who actually, as we've discovered, likes to dig very deep holes and, like basically scrape the bottom of the barrel, find out everything there is about a thing, a topic, whatever, and really finish the mission. And then go to the next place and then dig another hole and then the next and then the next. So this whole thing about, oh, but there are like 5 places where we could dig a hole and some people have started over here and then there's another hole that's being dug over there and we should basically just look at essentially all of them, really is something that I find difficult. And it's actually also difficult for me in real life. There I really try to um, be sure that I completely understand a problem, understand a topic before I move on, or solve an issue to my own satisfaction before I deal with something else, or even, in work life, it's a little bit different. But, sometimes you just have to say, okay, so this is something I can't deal with right now, so I'll just put this to the side. But then again, in my life, there isn't anything life or death related, whereas in Barovia, everything seems to be life or death. So that's an interesting experience. And the other day when I was DMing for my D&D group, I saw the opposite, because we are now in a situation where I have put them into a situation where in theory they can do, and I really mean this also in practice, what they like. Because I have an idea of where I want them to go or what kind of adventure I would like to play with them. But it really depends on them taking the bait or actually making certain things happen, taking certain steps that indicate that yes, they want to go there. If they don't, then all of this is just going to happen behind the scenes, and they will then have to, live with the consequences or go somewhere else, blah, 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 because this is a multiverse and they've stepped through a portal, so they're now somewhere else than where they used to be. So, and then I realized that, and of course this is something that all DMs know, and it's not a new realization for me, that they actually acted completely unexpectedly. So then, of course, in order for me to progress the plot, and here we are that, of course, even if it's a sandbox, there has to be some plot, otherwise they're just basically walking around doing nothing. I mean, like, it would be like putting somebody in a foreign city or a strange city that they don't know anything about, just say, well, go ahead. So then you would go, okay, well, do I have some money? In which case, I need to find a place to stay. I need to buy some food. But then beyond that, what do you do? Do you then just stay there and learn a trade? Or, so even in a sandbox, you have to give little pokes and nuggets to people that they can actually, to the players that they can actually look at and kind of go, oh yeah, that's something that I'm interested in, that's something I'm not interested in. Um, and it was really interesting because one of the characters actually said, this is pointless. We're not getting anywhere. And this is when I really felt, yep, that's what happens when you put people into a sandbox where they think that they're looking for something or they are looking for something, but the answer is, sorry, it's not here. Then the question is, how do they deal with this, but also how do you as a DM then run the sandbox? And there, I think if you are running a sandbox type game, and my D&D campaign at the moment is a sandbox type game because, like I said, they don't have to follow the nuggets. They can go somewhere else. This will have consequences, which they will have to live with, but they can. If they decide to follow a certain nugget, then of course the follow-on nuggets are already prepared in my head because they would be seeing and participating and driving a story that would unfold. However, if they don't engage with the story would run a prescripted course which they then can't alter because they're not engaging with it. So the world itself would be changed. What does that mean? Well, it's like if you decide not to, um, let's say, take a job, then of course this company will still do its thing. It'll flourish, it'll go under all on its own. But you will neither benefit from any positive developments in that company, nor will you be affected by any detrimental developments. It'll just keep going. So it's like, you decided two paths diverged in a yellow wood. You just decide to go left, and the right path will still travel on, and will go places which you will then never see. Um, and then depending on how tight your sandbox is, you can have certain things happen in the background, and then the repercussions, if they are life-changing or world-changing events, as they are quite often, as they quite often are in RPGs, have them affect the reality in game, and then the players see, okay, well, yeah, that's a bummer. Hmm. Somebody summoned an archdemon. Maybe if we had worked on this, and I'm not saying that this is what's happening in this game because it's not about an archdemon, nobody's summoning anything. But this is this is how you would then do it. But at the same time, you as the DM then have to give them something else. Or otherwise they will just be sitting there going, okay, so what's next? And then the other thing is true for my DSA campaign that I'm playing in, Ramen Creek, which is of course, and I don't like the word railroad because it is so negative, or the connotation is very negative. I prefer the pearl string term, um, which Tom Finn has used multiple times, where you basically have a series of events and they are kind of logically connected. And you basically, the way the adventure is presented makes this logic understandable for the characters in game, but also for the players. And so you don't really need to coax them, or it's never artificial because certain things will happen and they will understand why they should be happening, but then will also take quite predictable but logical next steps. And for those of you who know about Raben Creek, it's also on our channel, it's the story of a war that goes on between Al-Anfa and the Chemie-Reich in DSA. And it's a war story with all that entails. But never once did I feel that any of the decisions that we took did not have logical consequences or kind of like had to be shoehorned into a storyline to which we couldn't even subscribe. First of all, it's really well written. I really have to say that. I've never read it. I'm only playing through it, but from the way it's been presented so far, and we've got an excellent DM who, by the way, is also an author for DSA, so, um, that really makes a huge difference. But I never once felt that any decisions that I was taking were not taken under pressure in some shape or form. So basically, there is pressure, that there is something going on there. You really have to concentrate on what's going on. And it is tough sometimes. Some of the decisions were very hard, not because they were difficult to arrive at, but because they really were difficult. I mean, it's a war, but I could always kind of think, okay, if we decide to try this and if we fail, then it's likely that the following is going to happen. If we try this and we succeed, then it's likely that the following will happen. And usually we were right about 70% of the time. It was never like we were confronted with results where we were like, that doesn't fit anything that we understood of the story or how we acted within the story. But I would say, if I was to describe Raben Creek, then I would say it's a linear story and it's pearl string. Unless, of course, you decide to completely break the adventure by saying, we're out of here. We're not taking part in this anymore. We are going to um, desert the army, which of course would mean that we would be basically our lives would be forfeit, because when you leave the army without being discharged and just run away from battle, any army will kill you. If they find you, they will kill you. We would be ending up somewhere in the jungle trying to eke out a living and hiding from everybody, which of course you could say is then a campaign of its own, but it's then going to be a completely different story. You're going to completely leave that. And of course, the DM then would have to see, does he want to continue with this? And even then, he could bring you back into the war story by simply bringing the war to you. I mean, these are all options that they have. But, and there was one time when we were actually contemplating leaving the army because it was so terrible, or at least some of us leaving the army because they were in a very bad position due to some things that they had done or we had done, and also their personal background, which made them less desirable than other characters. But there, I would say I never really felt. I kind of know that it's more like a pearl string story than, let's say, Barovia, Curse of Strahd, where you can do anything in a non-linear fashion. The only thing that basically boxes you in, literally, is the boundaries of the world, because you simply can't leave. You cannot just say, oh, sod this, we're just going to leave Barovia. You can't, because Barovia is surrounded by a perimeter that you can't penetrate. You are stuck. But within that perimeter, you can do whatever you like. And you can go wherever you want to go. And I mean, I think in theory, we could just basically, I don't know, find an empty house or maybe even build one and become farmers. That would then also end the campaign, unless, of course, Strahd suddenly appeared on our doorstep and said, well, you're farmers, but I find you still interesting, and just abducts you to the castle, and then we have adventures there or whatever. But there is no obvious linearity to the events and to the places where we need to go, or in which order we need to go there. And I have to say, really, for me personally, that is a very new experience, because I've never played in such a situation, and it is very exciting, but it's also tough. Um, and then, of course, I'm DMing Die Sieben Gezeichneten, which is completely Pearl String, because really you're just basically things are happening and you just have to run along, and it goes on forever. It's 12 adventures in total if you play the whole campaign, if you play every single installment, and it really drives everyone towards one final point, and that's the focal point, and everything that happens has to happen in a certain order, because otherwise the story won't work. And that, of course, is very Pearl String, or that is almost railroady because, if you want to play this, you have to you have to kind of follow the story. People cannot just say, oh yeah, I'm going somewhere else, because then, you might just as well say, okay, well then, the world ends. Um, and the big bad has descended to to Earth and is going to take over and everybody dies. That's pretty much the end of the story if you don't do anything. Um, and of course, the adventure as written, or the campaign as written, of course, ends with the heroes being successful. So yeah. Um, and now when I think about it, it's it's really interesting as a player and as a DM to be experiencing all these things at the same time. So in conclusion, what do I prefer? Sandboxing as a player, or railroading, pearl stringing as a player, and sandboxing as a DM, or pearl stringing as a DM? And I think as a DM, I have come to dislike strong pearl stringing like in your average DSA campaign, because it really boxes me in. Because I can be, or I am, quite spontaneous sometimes also to my own detriment, because I come up with a really good idea that I think is a good idea, but then I forget the details. So we just run after this idea, and then when I have to pick it up later on, I'm like, oh yeah, well, what did I say? What was that guy's name? But also it means that some of the or the really good ideas that my players come up with in character cannot always be implemented because they simply don't fit the story. So I've been known to actually change the story in a sandboxy fashion where it is possible to fit the player's ideas, because sometimes they come up with super ideas and reasons why X, Y, or Z has happened. They have nothing to do with what really happened in the adventure or in the backstory, but they are so good that I just want them to be right. Because it's also kind of like nice to kind of get this input and then put it in, to really tell the story and write the story along with them rather than telling the story to them and having them act. So as a DM, I prefer the less pearl stringy approach. And as a player, I actually like both. I love both. But I also have to discipline myself as a player to say, okay, you have to put on a different hat. You have to think differently when you play Pearl String as opposed to Sandbox, in order to not break the game and therefore make it terrible for everybody else, including yourself, but mainly the DM and your other players. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I hope you enjoyed this, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day, night, whenever you're listening to this. And yeah, keep safe. Bye.